everybody. Years back, I was hitchhiking with my friends in the Balkans. We got lost somewhere in Serbia. Now, that was before smartphones, so we had to ask an actual human being for directions. But the only one available was this big, muscular guy in tracksuit, standing in front of his house, alone, and not very friendly looking. We had to ask him because he was the only one there, but at the same time, we felt kind of insecure, vulnerable. You know, being away from any main road when it was getting dark and all. And I have to admit, I had my own reservations, or biases, should I say. You know, a big guy, tracksuit, standing alone in front of his house, and so forth. Middle of nowhere, countryside. And on top of that, I could also see his body language, clearly saying something like, "Mind your own business and get off my property." And I really wanted to, but there wasn't much of a choice. So I gathered all my courage, went up to him, and started by asking, "Do you speak English?" A silent no for an answer. He just shook his head. Somewhat disencouraged, but I continued, tried on. "Hablas español?" Same thing, shake of head. I kept on trying. "Sprechen Sie Deutsch? Говоришь по-русски? Mówisz po polsku?" I asked in just about any language me or my friends knew at the time, but all I got in reply was this silent, decisive no, every time. And I remember thinking to myself, man, that was cold, unpleasant. And I was half scared, half irritated, and about to turn around and walk away when he suddenly said, "Parlez-vous français?" Right. We both laughed in that moment, and everything changed instantly. All tension disappeared. I managed to explain our situation, mainly with gestures, and he, the big bad guy in tracksuit, took out a little notepad and drew us a map with a pencil. See, humor is one of the few psychological mechanisms able to do that, to instantly transform strangers into people we feel safe around, people we can trust. And when we experience humor with somebody, this person begins to seem less strange and somehow more familiar. It's because when we laugh at something with somebody, we make a number of assumptions about that person. We assume that he or she has a similar knowledge, similar opinions, and worldview like our own. Humor changes our perception. It changes how we see people. So we also assume that this person has a good sense of humor, right? But what does good sense of humor really mean? Well, it means a sense of humor similar to our own. Basically, my sense of humor. When you say this to somebody, you have a good sense of humor. You mean my sense of humor. So we start to like this person more. Because A, we like people we share positive emotions with, and humor and laughter are very strong sources of that. And B, we also generally like people who seem similar to ourselves. But humor can do more than that. It can actually influence our motivations towards strangers, people we meet. And we can trace it on a very basic neurochemical level in our brains. Namely, genuine laughter releases this hormone, oxytocin. And it's a soothing hormone that gives way to feelings of affiliation and cooperation. So not only does humor make strangers appear less strange and more familiar, but it also makes us more willing to help them. And for me, this power of humor is especially fascinating when it comes to interacting with people from different cultures. because strangers from different cultures can sometimes seem especially strange, right? Things like how they talk, how much they talk, how they use gestures to express themselves, what clothes they wear. All the things that usually guide our perceptions when we meet people we don't know can be difficult to decipher, hard to interpret when meeting people from different cultures. Humor, laughter, and smile, on the other hand, are universal. They have very deep and old evolutionary roots that we all share. And we know this because we can trace their equivalents in behaviors of our close cousins in the animal kingdom, primates like chimpanzees and bonobos in the picture here. And thanks to that, humor, laughter, and smile are recognizable everywhere, and therefore can work their perception-changing magic, turning strangers into friends in every culture. In my encounter in Serbia, our initial perceptions of each other were focused on differences. I saw him as this potentially dangerous thug, and he saw me probably as this strange foreigner with nothing better to do than hitchhiking all day and trespassing into his property. But the moment we laughed together, all these perceptions and resulting judgments were suspended. And I truly believe that it was thanks to this shared moment of humor that the situation ended as it did. And as it were, he helped me. And I, well, relaxed. I think I even managed to say au revoir when I left. And it would be really nice to leave the stage now, actually. Finish off with this nice little story about humor uniting nations. Maybe even make a call to action. Say something like, we just have to smile and laugh more with strangers, and we can put an end to all conflicts. Fix the global warming. But I'm only halfway through with my talk. So smile to the world, and the world will smile back to you. Will it? Always? In the Lonely Planet guidebook, you can read that you should not smile to strangers when traveling to Poland, because the locals may think you're stupid. And here's a Norwegian joke for you, an old one. And that one was actually printed on the back cover of a brochure published by the Norwegian work agency, NAV, right? A brochure for newcomers to Norway. And this may sound funny, but there's actually some serious research backing these anecdotes. In one study, researchers investigated how people in different cultures perceive smiling and non-smiling strangers. And in particular, they asked the participants to assess the intelligence of smiling versus non-smiling individuals on pictures. And indeed, in both Poland and Norway, smiling individuals were perceived as less intelligent, but only slightly. In Germany, on the other hand, and that may be surprising to some of you, smiling individuals were the ones who were perceived as more intelligent. And the difference was quite significant. The difference was also significant in Iran, but the results were the other way around, were reversed. And what this study tells us is, one, smiling can influence how we perceive other people's intelligence, other people we meet. A rather serious personal characteristic and an important part of the first impression we make. And two, well, people in different cultures may use smile differently, smile in different situations, different contexts. So for example, when you're traveling, sometimes they may surprise you with a smile, other times not smile back. And what do we think or feel about people who don't smile back, right? Especially when we're the ones who's making an effort to be friendly and smile to them in the first place. And it gets even more tricky with humor. And one thing about humor and intercultural interactions is that there's usually somebody who doesn't speak their native language. When I moved to Norway, I really applied myself to learning Norwegian. And I'm a very disciplined and quick learner, so soon I was fluent enough to communicate almost exclusively in Norwegian with my colleagues at work, with clients on the phone. I could even write long, elaborate emails and run workshops in Norwegian. I could even argue with clerks in public institutions like the work agency in Norwegian. But despite all that, and at the same time, humor was often a problem. My colleagues were teasing each other and cracking one joke after another, but the exchange was just too difficult to follow. Too many words with double meaning to process, references to politicians, celebrities, and events I didn't know about. Strange jokes about Danes and Swedes that I lacked the background to understand and to find funny, to be perfectly honest, at the time. And all that at a very high tempo. Speed much faster than the regular, serious communication. And oftentimes, missing just one word meant missing out on fun. And if understanding humor was difficult, being able to participate actively in humor, join in, like the duck, was even harder, more challenging. And I really struggled with expressing the funny side of my personality in the beginning. And because I found humor to be more demanding, more challenging than the regular, serious communication, oftentimes I just withdrew, chose not to participate. And I don't know whether my colleagues perceived me, because of that, more as a stranger, a foreigner, in those moments. But the paradox here, you see, was that I perceived myself more as an outsider during the moments when the team was probably bonding the most, when they were having fun. The perception-shaping power of humor is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it can make strangers appear less strange and more familiar. On the other, lack or failed humor can emphasize the differences. And yes, you will have more fun with some people than with others. Perfectly natural. And very likely, you will find it easier to share humor with people who speak the same language, learned from the same books at school, watched the same TV shows growing up, have the same cultural background. But the point I'm making is this. In cross-cultural interactions, the risk of failure with humor can sometimes be higher. So when it happens, don't draw too far-fetched conclusions about yourself or the others. Rather, try to learn from failures. Although it may be a little difficult to learn from failed humor, especially your own failed humor, in one study, a staggering 70% of participants reported that they usually blamed others for their own failed humor. What it means is that most of us, when we tell a joke and the other person doesn't laugh, we go and blame that person. Maybe assume that he or she doesn't have a good sense of humor, right? But it's not natural to learn from failed humor, because it's not natural to think consciously about humor at all. We take it for granted. Something or somebody either is or isn't funny. Humor, successful or otherwise, does not make us stop and reflect. We're not interested. Or maybe we're also a little afraid that thinking about humor will kill the fun. As it was famously expressed by an American writer, E.B. White, analyzing humor is a little bit like dissecting a frog. Few people are interested, and the patient dies in the end. Now, I disagree, obviously, and I think that reflecting about how we use humor and how it shapes our perceptions won't kill all the fun. Rather, it may yet turn more strangers from different cultures into friends. Thank you.